on a high note of like weather, and then you think in your brain, that's what I'm going to go do in September. And you get out there and it's like 85 degrees.
It's not what you were hoping for.
It's terrible.
Not even a little bit.
It's terrible.
It's just terrible. What are you going to, do you want some of that maple vodka?
I think it's too sweet for my blood right now. I'm going to do this Montana
This is really
bourbon.
sweet? Does it really taste like syrup?
Super sweet, yeah.
Like really? Sprinkle a little maple vodka on your pancakes?
I mean, I think you could.
On a weekend, of course.
On a weekend. That's the only time I eat pancakes anyways. I'm a big fan of cooking pancakes for the kids.
Dude, we make pancakes all the time.
That's the best.
Protein pancakes, the way to go.
Those are fun. Yeah. I got to watch for eggs
what is this?
For Dane, but yeah.
Ooh.
There we go.
Ooh. Okay.
I think I just need to put us live in one more spot, and we are good to go. All right. Well, let's kick it. Is that Beastie Boys? Yeah.
This is the Okayest Hunter podcast. Never pass on shooter bucks, because that's just meat in the freezer. It's your tag. You hunt how you look.
Tastes like the Blackfoot River.
It's like the.
Sorry.
Tastes like Bigfoot's.
Awkward silence.
If you want to shoot Bigfoot, I'd do it with nozzle rounds.
For sure. Take down power, my friend.
Could you imagine if you got Bigfoot and you're like the round that got Bigfoot? You'd be like famous forever.
I think John Nason would be very pumped if we were able to do that.
And would it be good or bad? It would be like, I can't believe you killed him. No, I was being attacked. Like Bigfoot wouldn't just shake your hand. You'd have to put a round in him. And so, like, most people would love it. Other people might be like, you're a horrible human.
That sounds like another nation dividing.
Dude, the Bigfoot controversy would be...
I'm not sure. When we were in Oregon, I mean, Pacific Northwest, I was keeping my eyes open, you know? Like, there's a lot of dark timber out there.
There's a lot of dark timber.
I don't know what's lurking.
Bigfoots are tempted by the dark timber.
I feel like I would have spotted some Bigfoot poop. Like some scat. You'd notice that.
That's AI Bigfoot generation where they're like...
That's going to be like this out there.
It's just a giant man turd.
You're going to see that.
Is he real? Like,
no.
It's somewhere in my mind, I just think there's a small chance it could be real. And that's enough. Like,
I'm not there.
It's like the last little ember burning in the fire the next day. And if you blow on it enough, you could reignite that puppy. It's always there for me. Bigfoot's always that little ember that I could get going.
I like that for you.
And so every now and again, the wind blows, and I'm like, "Oh, we could be real."
I did stumble across a trail camera picture on some trail camera of Wisconsin, whatever.
Didn't you used to run that page?
Whitetail Wisconsin Trail Cam or Wisconsin Whitetail Trail Cam.
Is that still a thing?
No, Dave, we have not done anything on that in many, many years.
Okay.
But there was a cougar trail cam picture, mountain lion from Townsend, where my parents' cabin is. So I sent that to them earlier today. I was like, hey,
it's a little alarming.
Watch your butts.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know how you could. If it's going to get you, it's going to get you.
Yeah. The good thing is you won't know it.
Yeah.
You'll just be dead.
Yeah. It's not going to work.
That's the way to go.
Things are very stealthy. Anyway, so yeah, Nosler's a partner of ours. Use code OHP for 20% off. We typically put that in the show notes. I can't do it on YouTube because it doesn't link, so I don't do the hyperlink. But anyway, Latitude, what I would say for Latitude, I mean, lots of stuff coming down the pike for those guys. They're always innovating. They're always putting out new gear, colorways. Like, stay frosty with Latitude. You're always going to be pleasantly surprised with everything they're bringing out as it leads up to season. But my tip of the week for them, that I don't do tips of the week, this isn't like a normal segment, I'm just saying it that way, is practice shooting on your strong side and your weak side. I think that's an important takeaway. Make sure you're practicing with the gear that you intend to bring out. It's one of the favorite. That's probably the biggest reason I didn't go, is I'm not like ready yet. And part of being ready isn't just getting my camouflage in order and my stuff scent free and blah, blah, blah. It's also like putting my gear through the paces before I actually do in the woods. Because I think that's just a recipe for an accident. And
I mean, if you're going to hunt out of a saddle, like you just mentioned, practicing off strong side and weak side. But I would also, like, if you have a tree set up where you're going to, like, you got a target, leave your target in the same place and try setting up your platforms in multiple spots around that tree. Because I hunted out of a tree stand Sunday morning, our second day of season. Then I hunted out of my Latitude saddle in the evening. And like the way I had it positioned, I had trails on one side and I had a lot of trails on the other side. So I was trying to like put it in that sweet spot. But then like I practiced drawing and like getting in position. And it's just something, if you haven't done it for a year, I would practice it for sure.
It's a smart thing to do.
I failed. I didn't practice.
And that was my hang up last year. And I think we'll see that at some point here when the videos are done. But position of that thing, it seems like you're always going to get the deer coming a slight bit off of where you had predicted or projected them to come through, and that little bit can really mess with how you are able to draw back on them when you're in the saddle. So in a tree stand too, just the same. It's like if they come too far in your weak side in your tree stand, like you're not going to do it. So anyway, check out Latitude code OHP for all of our partners. You see the rack hub we got on display still here for all of your Euro mounts, antler mounts, single antlers, pairs of antlers, Euro mounts. They have a wide array now. They've added as we've been working on them for over 2 years or something like that, and they did not have this many products when we started.
No, and they keep getting better and nicer.
Yeah, definitely. If it's wall worthy, you got to get rack hub. Use code OHP over there, and then Gerber. I think we got all of the knives shipped out that are co-branded OKS Hunter and Gerber. So those are out there. We're actually doing another camping trip with our family in October, which I'm kind of enthused about. We've always wanted to do that, and hunting season kind of takes over, and we're going to do it this year. So we got a campsite booked. We're going to go in October. We booked it like in spring. But having all that Gerber camping gear is actually pretty dope, as we got to experience a turkey camp. And it's nice. You want to have something to wash your dishes with, but it does give a different vibe when you're trying to like chop up a pancake and syrup and it's not on a paper plate, where then it gets all soggy and gross and starts dripping off the bottom, and it's like a little bit more manageable. So lots of good gear and equipment for those guys, not just knives, but multi-tools and everything else. So even we had a hatchet for splitting up wood.
Gus put it to work.
Yeah, he's chopping down trees. Quit chopping those trees down. All right. Well, season is here for us here in Wisconsin.
It is.
We did run a BOGO 50% off sale for our hats and I think it ends at the end of today. So if you hear this episode and you want to like take advantage of it, get on our website before that goes away. Subscribe to our email if you haven't. Subscribe on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube. It all is nice to know that people are actually subscribing. But we do have a guest with us. I'll shut up and bring him on. We have Derrick Dixon, who has been making his podcast rounds, like a tour, basically. You're like a famous person now doing this podcast tour. Derrick with Whitetail Research. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, I'm doing good. How are you?
We're good, man. This is a good place to be. The studio is a good place for us. Spirits are lifted.
This is like a little sanctuary, a little mini deer camp that we get to experience on Tuesdays, even outside of deer season. And we're excited to talk about a guy who's as excited as you are about following big deer and learning about them, which you've shown as your absolute passion over the last few months with your YouTube channel, that I think has been very well accepted throughout the whitetail community. So thank you for taking the, kind of diving onto a sword and doing that for all of us to learn from, because it's been really cool watching your videos.
Yeah, absolutely.
You posted, I think, the debut one about 2 months ago, and it's been a fast and furious start for you from that. So let's rewind, and I'd love to hear you talk about kind of how, I'm supposed to roll my chair here, how you kind of went about this decision. Like, you had a career, that career ended. You can explain that. You did this thing for a year with this drone that you invested in, and optimistically so, hoping that like this day would come and it would do what it's doing. So you had the foresight to kind of see that and put in the work to map to it. But let's back it up and hear kind of your origin story and kind of what led you to not make the decision and the leap and the jump entrepreneurially. Is that a freaking word? But also like that. What planted the seed for you to like think that this is something you wanted to do? So lots to unpack there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, kind of the original origin story. I'll start kind of all the way back, I guess, whenever I started hunting. I mean, I started hunting whenever I was 6 years old, so that's kind of where the initial passion, whenever it was legal in Missouri. My grandpa was always really heavily into it. My dad really wasn't so much, but mainly my grandpa. And I think my dad actually took me for my first year. But my grandpa was the one that kind of shepherded me moving forward. And he was kind of the one that taught me exactly what to do in terms of how to get a mature buck, put up on the wall type thing. And he made me pretty successful throughout that time frame. And kind of more so as to where this idea kind of stemmed from and my passion for it. I remember whenever he was getting older, he's still alive, by the way, but whenever he was around 79 years old, I had taken him out hunting, and I was kind of, it turned where it was like my goal to get him on a mature buck at that time frame. And we had positioned him very well to do so and put him in a great location, kind of made everything just perfect around where we knew he was going to be hunting that season. And he was there with his crossbow. I was out somewhere else with my compound. And then we'd all reconvene back at the cabin. And whenever we made it there, then we were just kind of discussing, trading stories and everything, what all we'd seen, etc. And he had seen one of the target bucks, and he's, oh yeah, I saw one of the, I don't remember what the deer's name was, but one of our target bucks, and he was 30 yards away. And I was like, okay, well, that's why are we not going to track this deer right now? Like, I don't really understand what this story is, Grandpa. And he's like, well, I just he was at 30 yards and he was sitting there browsing, just kind of hanging around, and I just thought he was one of the most beautiful deer I'd ever seen in my life. And I was still kind of looking at him like wide-eyed, like, yeah, but like I know what deer you're talking about. Why are we like, why didn't you shoot this deer? And it took me a while. It took me quite a few years of seeing him do that same thing over and over, where he just wanted to go out there and watch mature bucks interact with other deer and observe them and their behavior. And he thought that they were just truly beautiful creatures. And just, he didn't really give a rip about shooting one. He liked shooting does and kind of younger animals so that way he can eat the meat, but he didn't really care about getting antlers on his wall anymore. He really truly enjoyed seeing them. And that kind of flooded into me a little bit in terms of wildlife photography. And I started kind of making it my goal and engineering myself to get in positions with a camera to take pictures and be able to bring those pictures back and video back for him to see. As he kind of got older and continued to not be able to go out in the woods as much. So that's kind of where the passion for whitetail deer and why I just love watching them as much as I possibly do. But I'd ended up dropping out of college in 2019, and I went and I got a technology job that I was underqualified for. I don't really know why I got it. And I worked it for 5 years, and across that time frame, in 2022, kind of skipped the 2019 portion, but in 2022, the DJI Matrice 30T had came out, and that drone was like the pinnacle of anything that I've ever imagined a drone could possibly be. And it was also 15 grand just for the base model, and some of the batteries way out of my budget. And I remember telling my wife that, like, no matter what happens, I will buy this drone. Like, I'll sell my truck, I'll sell my camera gear, I will sell everything so I can buy this drone, because I knew what it was capable of. I knew that you were going to be able to see whitetail deer, but not only that, it had the rangefinder pin capability to where you can drop pins. And GPS coloring deer has been something that I've really enjoyed reading studies on in the past from different universities, from MSU Deer Lab to Auburn and Georgia, et cetera. And I kind of wanted to do it for myself in my own controlled environment. And initially, it wasn't to post content off of it. I was fascinated to do it for myself in general. And then I realized there was something that I could potentially take to YouTube. And anyways, in 2022, my first son was born. So that kind of eliminated the idea of selling the truck and my wildlife photography gear, because now I had to play the role of dad, and I wasn't going to be prepared for that. And fast forward to 2024, me and my boss, he had recognized in me that I was kind of hating myself. I was hating my job. I was working in an office all the time. I was working in an office more than I was supposed to be doing, in fact, for my job role. And it was just kind of ramming me into a wall, per se. I was just going insane. And he had seen that I was in a really dark place mentally. So one day he had pulled me aside and we had a really long conversation about it. And a few months later, my second child was born, my daughter. And I was on paternity leave. And whenever I made it home, I wasn't home for 3 to 4 hours. And he had called me. And we first started off the conversation. He asked me about my daughter and how everything went. And everything went well, etc. And then he was like, well, I really wanted to call you because I wanted to let you know that I'm firing you. And I was like, oh, okay. That's could have started off with that, buddy, like Mr. Friend. Yeah. Which we're still friends today and et cetera. But still, like, in that moment in time, I definitely had a little bit of hatred for him. But because in my brain, I just had a second kid, that kind of eliminates the idea of fulfilling whitetail research. And I'm just going to continue to work this job. Housing market's been terrible. I've been saving up. I'm finally about to the situation where I can buy a house. And here I am now, jobless with 2 kids and a wife, living in an area that I don't really like. And it's like kind of decision time, right? Like something's going to have to happen here. And I'd immediately started flooding my brain with kind of different jobs that I could go out and immediately get to just kind of fulfill the exact job role that I had. And I could have, and I actually ended up applying to some of them throughout some of the harder times throughout that period. But in that very moment, I had decided that I was going to buy the drone, and I walked back into the house and I told my wife, "I'm buying the freaking drone." I hopped online that moment and I just bought it. Just impulse, just purchased the
Before you
stinking
could
thing.
second guess yourself
Yeah,
almost.
before I could second guess it, I bought all the batteries. I bought 3 DJI generators. I bought all sorts of random equipment, and I spent a lot of money really, really quickly. And it was like, we're doing this. We're moving back home. We're going to do research. We're going to focus on whitetail, et cetera, whatever. And yeah, so that's kind of like what made it happen, and then kind of the will behind it, and also a little bit of the story as to why I'm so passionate about whitetail deer.
Yeah, I appreciate the backdrop of the story as to why you're so passionate about it, because that helps a lot, and I think that actually will help kind of quell anybody that's like drone video bad. Like I think knowing where you came from is actually a really important part of the story of where this is going and why. And I think some people forget to incorporate their story and their why into what they're doing, and that's really good to hear.
And I think as we go on, I am a deer nerd and I've watched all of Derrick's stuff and I've listened to some podcasts. So like, it's hard because I know a little bit that I want him to explain, but like also I'm going to ask some questions based off of like prior knowledge. So like, I think there's another piece to this that you'll explain eventually about like how this is good for research, but like it didn't aid you in hunting, obviously. But like that element you're talking about with your grandfather, and then you kind of taking on the role of like bringing him in with the idea of putting him on deer is a cool little thing, something we all kind of experience with like the older generation of like either dads or uncles or grandparents who brought you into and I don't mean just like dads or uncles, moms or whoever brought you
Yeah.
in, but like eventually those tables turn and like you get to be the one who kind of like analyzes the situation and puts them into the place. And being someone who obviously enjoyed observing and learning about deer, what was it like before you got the drone and before maybe you even did the wildlife photography? Was like trail cameras, was that like an obsession of yours? Was that something you did, or was it like straight into like taking photos of them? How did that kind of like progression of like observing and learning, like what did that look like for you in your hunting career?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel like you know a little bit of my past for some reason. I don't know. Maybe I could be wrong, but yeah. My grandpa actually, he had started doing a lot of trail cam studies on the property in terms of the former research and doing doe to buck analysis on a lot of the private land that we were trying to manage, and that in turn tried to attempt to manage deer population, but with new clear cuts going onto the property and doe numbers going up dramatically. I don't think they were ready for the amount of does that we had intake of. But anyways, yeah, he was pretty passionate with research in terms of utilizing trail cameras. And then at one point, I don't mention this on many podcasts, but you asked me to go prior to my photography world. I had gotten into trail cameras pretty hard, and I actually had an Instagram. I hope nobody knows me from this Instagram, but it was called Trail Cam Guy, and I started off posting pictures of myself and trail cameras, stuff that I was going around and doing, and then I started kind of outsourcing and pulling in more content, and the channel grew pretty large. And then I realized, like, why in the crap am I posting other people's stuff? And then by that time, I started getting into wildlife photography. And it's like, why in the crap am I posting other people's stuff onto a freaking Instagram page for likes? Like, it was just the stupidest thing ever. So I shut down the page immediately once I realized that. And then I never revived it until now. I've revived the channel. That's why the channel, or that YouTube, or keep in this. That's why the Instagram page already has like almost 10,000 subscribers. Cause I think the time that I left it, it had like 12,500 or something. And then I just abandoned it and let it sit for a couple of years, and then it died back down. And
Yeah.
and now I've revived it back. But so yeah, no, I got into trail cameras pretty hard throughout a time frame, and really I just enjoyed, kind of like I'd mentioned before, I just enjoyed seeing them in the first place. But at the same time frame, I was also big into hunting. I mean, I'd killed a couple of deer while utilizing trail cameras, not based off of trail cameras, but while utilizing trail cameras throughout those years. And then and then I started focusing. I think it was in 2021 or so. And I think that the reason why I switched my focus, I started focusing on wildlife photography in 2021. I think the reason I started switching that focus around is because I was living away in a bigger city. And whenever I came down back to kind of like what I would call real life outside of the city, out in the woods, then versus taking my bow and putting all this pressure and all this stuff on top of me, I just enjoyed going and sitting at the base of a freaking tree with my camera and just watching stuff. And I wasn't really particularly trying to get close to mature bucks all the time. Oftentimes I would intentionally position myself in areas where I had a good chance of, but like I was taking pictures of pileated woodpeckers. I was taking pictures of just leaves blowing around on the trees. Like I didn't care. I was doing nature photography, wildlife photography, landscape photography, you name it, while I was out there and just sitting, phone off, taking in nature versus bringing my bow and kind of putting a lot of pressure on myself. So I think that's kind of why that started stemming in 2021-ish timeframe for wildlife photography.
Just that connection. You just missed that connection.
Well,
Yeah.
the fact that you had to make this bit of a commute too, I think that can kind of shift the gear of the conversation into what I would call, and I don't think this is, and probably is the majority of our audience, but I could be wrong. I think a lot of folks that might subscribe to OKS Hunter as a brand, maybe not literally subscribe, love the idea of deer hunting and they want to be deer hunting all the time, but then can't as much as they would hope to. But when they do get to, I don't know, the odds are kind of stacked against you because I just had a trail cam picture come through a little bit ago. Another hunter, not the same one as before. So that's two different guys on the same camera. Yeah. So it's getting pressured already. It's like, it's just you're limited by a lot when you don't have time. You have two kids, you understand to a degree how that can affect things. It's not that your wife won't watch them. For me, at least, it's a little bit of guilt that she is watching them, and then also I want to be there with. So I get to all of that to be like, what are some of the things we can start to extract from the research you have and the findings that you've uncovered thus far, knowing that you're going to be doing this more frequently, that can either myth bust or debunk or affirm some assumptions we've had about these animals that could increase our odds when we have time. Time, I think, is our best asset for hunting. I've always argued that if I had more and more time, of course I would get it done. When you have less and less time, like, it's just tougher to make it happen when you have limited sits you can do. Like if you have 3 per year, what can you do to maximize that? And I think that's a narrative we've taken with some other guests too. How can we maximize our hunts? It doesn't have to only be that, but I think that's a good starting point.
Yeah. And I think what you're mentioning with kind of your fan base and your kind of core of OKS Hunter, and the fact that a lot of them, kind of like me prior, didn't have a lot of time to get out in the woods to be able to devote as much time as you really need to really hone in on a mature buck in some cases. Really, at that rate, whenever you're kind of becoming kind of a weekend-ish warrior, you're lowering your chances dramatically to be able to get on that mature buck. And I think that one of the things I've noticed about people like that, like myself in the previously, and then other guys that I just know locally, is that they start relying really heavily on what their trail cameras are showing them, which is fascinating that you brought that up, that you're having people walk by, and that's a different kind of realm to it. I haven't been able to research public land properties where there is that heavy human pressure element implemented into it. I've been able to research private properties where there's some pretty heavy hunting pressure, but nothing at the level of a public land property. But even then, kind of excluding the human side of it, allowing what their trail cameras are showing them to really dictate their time in terms of how they're going to go and spend, be able to utilize their time in terms of how they're going to go out and hunt. And also it affects them in terms of their decision making really, really heavily. In the fact that if you're getting pictures of maybe a mature buck on camera A and you have camera B, C, and D, and those cameras never show a mature buck ever, and every once in a while they get pictures of does, etc. But you know that they're in like even maybe a better location than camera A, but for whatever reason, camera A is showing the mature buck once a week, then you're probably going to go and hunt pretty close by somewhere to camera A, and you're just going to let B, C, and D kind of die in the back of your mind because you're going to be really hyper focused on camera A. And I think that's a little bit of an issue because in some situations you can try to force things with your limited time onto camera A location where maybe you're not hunting your best situation. You don't have the best odds going into that location. But since your time is being so hyper focused on that one area, then you're going to force something that you shouldn't have ever done whenever you had better odds over at camera C and, that general location, or maybe camera D, and you could have plopped up to those areas and hunted a higher odds situation where you weren't going to bump anything moving in or out. And you had and maybe you had thermals to your advantage and wind to your advantage and just kind of everything in your favor, versus jumping into a situation where you're starting to stack odds against you preemptively. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that happens more and more, especially with and our buddy from Good Sit Mobile, Brian Douglas, just put a post on his Instagram story about cell cameras and how everyone sees it as such a horrible thing or like a negative thing that there's cell cameras all over public lands. Now we're talking public lands for a second, but he was talking about how he sees it as a positive thing every time he sees one because it's less pressure that's actually intruding and bumping deer for people going to check cameras or hunt, because everyone's waiting for that picture of the one big buck before they go and hunt, which was an interesting take. And like, Derrick had done a video, one of his series, about like you had like tracked deer movement all around these cameras, then they never walked in front of the camera. And it was incredible to watch what he had found, where like these deer were right there. They just didn't walk in front of the camera.
I think that's something
we get so fixated on getting that positive, like, oh, there he is, go get him. But like he just explained, like it's man, and with no time, how do you know that though? Like, without boots on the ground, being able to walk in there and read sign, it's really tough.
Yeah, I think the cell cam is like you have a boot on the ground and it walked. It's like
laces untied.
And I'm not a trapper, so I can't say that we have a trapping podcast on our network. And Zach can call in, or he could, scold me or something. But with a trap, you have to put it in such a incredibly specific spot to get a paw or whatever critter foot in there. And I feel like trail cams are kind of like that. Like, it's so specific. And you can do things like you can do the mock scrape and you can pee in it. You can spray the branch and all the things to try to like get them to stop and go. But there might be a bigger scrape on the other side of that tree that they did. Something that I would like to get your take on, Derrick, is you were in IT and technology. And something I learned when I was in IT and technology, which I also hated, by the way, so I'm not doing it anymore either. I also quit to pursue my dreams. So like we have that in common. But something we uncovered was a desire path. And I remember like looking at, there's like some image on a college campus we would use all the time. And you wouldn't think this would apply to technology, but it was like this beautiful blade brick path. And it's like, and then you see this like matted dirt path cutting the corner, because that's a desire path. So someone wanted people to walk in this beautiful paved way that they had made. But it wasn't the fastest path from point A to point B on that college campus. So no one was walking on it. And I think deer have their desire paths, and they can change, much like a river will change through a landscape based on impediments like a rock or a dam or whatever. Suddenly a new path will emerge. Maybe it's because there's a coyote scent blowing that way one day. And now that user path is like, or that, what the hell do they call it? My brain. Path of desire path, like, is now carved out around your camera, and you're not going to see those deer, but they're there probably. And like, I think you can speak to that with the drone study.
Yeah. I'm going to start stealing the terminology desired path, and I'm just going to coin it as a Whitetail Research.
Do it, man. I got no claim on that.
That's fair.
Yeah. So anyone watching this live stream, I came up with that, and I told them about it prior to the recording. But I think that's a really good way of explaining it, and that's why I've done a couple of videos in terms of utilizing different software and then also boots on the ground effort to preemptively kind of X off these areas where deer cannot travel on your property. So going in and looking for these, not all topographical features will have this, but looking for little 8-foot cliffs that run the inside of a ridge system. Or, you can use something as simple as, while in person, a fallen tree, and that fallen tree just has a, giant root wad, and deer are going to be forced to walk around it in that section. And I think that one thing that I've learned that's really important from that is whenever you're mapping off a property and all these locations where deer absolutely 100% cannot walk, and you're trying to locate funnels, as we all know, kind of traditionally, a funnel is you're looking for something where it's really tight, and deer, again, they're being forced to travel in this really, sub 30 yard, sub 50 yard little location. And to me, a funnel can be as wide as 200 yards, 300 yards, 400 yards, as long as it's forcing deer to travel in this particular area, then in my opinion, that's a funnel. And you can utilize that to your advantage where if say you only have topographical features where you're only getting funnels that are 200 yards wide or 300 yards wide, then basically sit on the fringes of that 200-yard wide funnel off in the distance, and if you have the time, and slowly work yourself in till you find that desired travel route where deer are consistently traveling through that section. And in my opinion, that's one of the greatest little tools that you can utilize preemptively, because a lot of that work can be done before ever entering the woods. So whenever you're at your IT job and you're sitting on your computer, I would highly recommend opening another tab, throwing up Onyx or something in it, and go out and just map all of these little terrain features. And what I was using was TrainX actually, and using a 37-degree slope. And from what I've seen on not just the main property I researched, but all the other properties as well, was that the 37 degrees just seemed to be where it was like too steep, like overall. And then whenever I drug it down to 25 degrees, that was where it was questionable. Sometimes I made it in field and it actually was too steep. Sometimes I made it in field and deer were just hammering a trail right up and down the middle of it. And then in some situations it would be too steep, but if you walked up halfway on that area, if you kind of scrambled halfway up on the area, then there was a trail hammered out like in the side of it, just like a 1 foot or 2 foot, 3 foot trail where they're hammering it right into the side of it. But basically, you can do a lot of the preemptive stuff beforehand and then go in and field and verify everything that you've preemptively seen, and then find those 200-yard funnels, or maybe in some scenarios, you actually have real funnels where they're 30 yards or 40 yards, something actually really tight, and be able to go in and hunt off of those day one versus kind of having to figure it all out in the field whenever you go out on your limited time frame that you have.
I like that.
That's a great tip. And I have a question that relates to that. So obviously, like you said, as hunters, we want to like get the maximum probability. So those tight funnels, obviously, we love that, right? Like if you can funnel a deer within 60 yards and you can set up to shoot both sides, beautiful. That's wonderful. But you kind of mentioned that some of those funnels are a little bit wider. So like say a 400-yard wide funnel, right? Like, and on some of his videos, he's done a great job finding these cliffs where deer don't pass and like noticing where they cut down and cut up beforehand. But say like a 400-yard wide funnel, right? So the deer still has lots of different probabilities of where they're going to travel throughout that funnel. And you kind of mentioned starting on the edge and working your way in. I'm just curious, through your thermal drone research, like following these deer around, what have you noticed, say like a 400-yard funnel, right? So like there's something that's somewhat impeding, whether that's a cliff, a ridge, and a field. As far as like wind and thermals, because you've done a lot of that with like thermals and how that plays in, how have you noticed deer, specifically bucks, traveling through, say, a 300 or 400-yard wide funnel using the wind to their advantage? Do they always have a trail that they like to travel through that? Or do they shift their movements based on what the wind is doing or based on time of day with what the thermal's doing? Like, did you notice that them shifting their pattern traveling through the funnel? Or was it pretty consistent? Like they like their trail and that's what they used. Sorry.
Yes, that's actually you're fine. It's actually a really interesting topic to get into, and I have tried to find a correlation in relation to wind, and I haven't yet. And I think that's across the board for all GPS color studies as well. Is that their utilization of wind just seems very kind of iffy, but thermals seems to be. I wasn't ready for that to come up. Thermals seems to be their number one thing that they're used to utilizing. And then the other thing that I would probably focus on that's fascinating more than thermals is habitat edges. And one of the things that I was noticing is, say you have that 400-yard wide funnel going on, oftentimes it started to really not make much sense how deer were traveling up and throughout that 400-yard wide funnel in this example. I think the particular one that's coming to my mind was around 275 yards wide. But what I noticed was no matter where they were traveling up and through this kind of 250 or 275 yard wide ridge system, once they made it to the habitat edge, and that could be a clear cut, it could be a field edge, whatever it was, once they made it within 20 to 45 yards of that or 50 yards of that, then it's almost as if they would re-engineer and retool their mind in the fact that they know exactly where they are again. And then they would just move with that habitat edge, if that makes sense. So I saw it very, very consistently with clear cuts, for an example, where where deer are moving up and down a ridge and towards a clear cut in this example. And once they made it to the clear cut, then it was as if, they kind of lifted their head and they realized exactly where they were, kind of as if you've seen like a community scrape type thing, or a post sign scrape or a post sign rub. These signals that allow them to re-engineer where exactly they are in their home range. And then once they kind of retool their brain on the fact that, oh, this is where I'm at, then they move based off of that more often than kind of utilizing different sections of a ridge system or a 400-yard wide funnel, dependent upon wind and thermals. I think the general answer for what I've seen in terms of how they're utilized, let's say it's a ridge, a ridge kind of moving up and down, and it's 400 yards wide, is that they're kind of on like the top third section of it. That seems to be kind of a standard across the board. That's something that we already knew as hunters, but that I have seen that pretty consistently, where they're not, traveling that entire thing at the bottom third of it or halfway down it. They're kind of at that top third section. But for the most part, that top third, say on a 400-yard wide ridge, that top third could be, 30 yards or 75 yards wide. They're just kind of traveling anywhere between that. It's not like a beaten down trail every single time, especially for a mature buck. But once they make it to something on the other side, if all you have is mature timber, then that's unfortunate, because you're not going to have these habitat edges where, they're going to be able to walk through and hit them, kind of like hitting a wall, and then move based off of that. But if you do have habitat edges, and that could be a field edge or just CRP, et cetera, then they're definitely utilizing those to travel off of.
Now, in your experience with watching, you put in a ton of hours of watching these deer travel through and do the exact thing you just mentioned. I'm just curious, you mentioned the edges as kind of being like a navigational point, or them realizing where they are in their home range. Do you feel like when they hit that edge where there's a habitat diversity of some sort, even if it's a field edge up to hardwoods, do you feel like their movement patterns changed at all? Like based off, like, is that because like now they feel more secure? Like I can escape this way or this way? Like did their patterns, like did they move slower? Were they moving different through that monotonous terrain than they were when they hit that edge? Like was it a safety feature, do you think? Or was it just purely like navigational? Like now they know I'm going to follow this edge. Did the movement remain the same? Does that make sense?
From what I've seen, I think that it's purely navigational. It's
Okay.
kind of like walking until you run into like a fence row type situation, and then you see the fence. Like kind of imagine yourself as a human, and leave your phone behind and GPS, compass, everything back at home, and just take a straight bead through the woods. And you're going to attempt. You'll find yourself trying to use these types of things as well whenever you're walking through the woods. These types of navigational things, where whenever you see it, you remember it, and then you're able to kind of retool, like, oh, okay, this is where or even like if you had which deer don't have this, but they've lived in it, so they know it a little bit better than us. But if you went onto a new property and you just looked at topography and you kind of memorized all these areas, and then you went out and you walked it, you'd be looking for those kind of navigational cues, those picturesque things that you're going to memorize off of. And I think they're doing the same thing with that. In terms of the way that they're traveling, the speed that they're traveling, and everything, it really seems pretty consistent across the board. They could speed up, they could slow down. I've seen some areas where they just decide to start running, down through a drainage and back up on the other side. And I have no idea why he did that. Maybe he picked up a scent of something and he decided to, and then he cools right back down and he's kind of sniffing the ground the entire way. But yeah, no, in terms of something direct to that, I also think that I probably don't have near enough data to make a full answer on that as to whether or not there's a correlation, because there could be. But yeah, no, at the moment, I personally have not seen a correlation.
What are you trying to get at, Derrick? Across from me. Not on the screen. This Derrick.
Me?
Yeah. Why do you ask that question?
I was just asking whether, like, traveling through open hardwoods, in my mind, from what I know, my gathered experiences, deer maybe travel faster or more random, especially in the Northwoods of Wisconsin, where they're trying to avoid or evade or not be as easily patterned by wolves or coyotes or hunters. But when you reach an edge, like an edge of a clear cut, as the other Derrick mentioned, typically that provides a bit more safety, because if there's danger in one, you run to the other. If there's danger on the other, you run to the other, right? Like, so there's like more options for running away or escaping or eluding based off of having 2 habitat terrain types versus 1.
So
I was wondering, maybe they walk a little faster or more a bit random coming across the hardwoods. He mentioned traveling the top third, but then I thought maybe they slow down when they would hit some sort of edge, a CRP edge or a wooded edge, clear cut edge, that maybe that terrain offers more of a security in that they know they can go with more decisions in their court.
And the reason I ask why you ask, I always like to ask that question, just in general. I think it's a good practice. But additionally, for us weekend warriors to hold our feet to the fire of the initial, like, how do I interpret that? What's the benefit of knowing that information?
Yeah.
Even if we had a conclusive correlation and causation outcome here, what do I do with that information? What's the point of knowing that?
The point of knowing that would know that deer are edgy critters, right? And I want to hear his explanation too, Derrick's. But like knowing that setting up close to an edge might cause them to linger a bit more. Like if they're coming out of thick and you're waiting at the edge, that might be a staging area where you can get them to wait in daylight versus hunting in open hardwoods. You need them to be on a serious
You got to be right
course.
on them.
You have to, like, it's got to be
so hard to predict.
Stars aligning versus finding sign on the edge where they may be spending more time or lingering or feel more safe. You want to be where deer feel safe because that's where they're going to be in daylight.
Yeah.
And also that's going to affect, like in a situation where if they are kind of skitterish in the big woods and they make it to a clear cut edge and they cool down. Think about yourself as a bow hunter in that situation where you have point A where deer's busting it through the woods and now you're gonna have to try to stop him and sling an arrow at him, or you can hunt up where he's gonna be a little bit more comfortable, move by you slower, get an easier shot on him. So yeah, and also just from the perspective of, say he even is moving past you in a clear cut area, if you had to make a pop grunt or something to try to stop him, he's probably less likely in that scenario, if there is a correlation between these two things, that he wouldn't bust out as soon as he heard a sound. Whereas in the woods, if he's still being kind of, a little bit on edge, then there's a higher odds of that, I would feel.
I can tell you from personal experience, even if a deer is not on the edge, if it's a mature deer and you're in open hardwoods and you grunt and there is no deer within 100 yards of him, he will spook if that deer is smart. Because I've done that too many times where I've grunted at a deer where they can see. There's no deer. They'll look around. He's gone. A mature deer, 5.5-year-old, he can't see a deer, but he hears a deer. Goodbye. So like that's where the thick comes in. The thicker it is, you're right, like the harder it is for them to decipher exactly what's there. Yeah. And they tend to feel more comfortable. So that's where my question was coming from.
I find it interesting that you're, and this is, I'm not tying this back to the initial point, but I actually I liked how you said, think of it like if you were, well, not if you're human, we are human. As a human, you're traversing this territory of this landscape without your technology and all that jazz. And yeah, you're probably taking the path of least resistance. You're making it easy on yourself. You're kind of logging, major landmarks. You get to some sort of edge, you're going to walk that edge. It's just kind of like you're going to walk along a river bottom. You're going to walk atop a ridge or the bottom.
A trail.
A trail for sure. And I've seen deer walk trails a ton. And I'm always like, getting off the beaten path and get in there thick and deep. And I'm like, there they are, right on the freaking trail. Of course they are. And that's not always true, but like path of least resistance. But the other thing is like I've been, I don't know, indoctrinated on this concept that deer see the world with their nose. And I 100% believe that's true. But they also have eyes. If you get to a big open field edge, you might want to stop, and now they have vision on their side. And I think the senses may have gone from like relying on your nose from 70% and your eyes on 30% in a hardwood setting, as an example. I'm making this up. You get to a field edge. Now that vision has increased a little bit. Now you got 60% of your vision. You still got your nose doing its job too, but you can now see and scan an area. And so to your point about like safety and cover and like exit plan and all that stuff, I just wonder if it's kind of like, I can see where I'm going now. I feel safer because I can see some stuff coming. I mean, we know these creatures rely on their eyes a ton because I've been pegged out of things visually. That's why you try not to move. You try to blend in. You try to get a backdrop. We invest a lot of money in camouflage, or in my case, plaid. They have all of these senses. So I don't know where that. I have no point in saying that other than I just found it to be quite interesting.
Well, and Derrick, jump in if you have anything based off that. But I also have a question for you if you don't, based off of your studies.
Okay. Wait,
Here's the
what was
question.
okay. Yeah, I was about to say, did you ask it?
No, I did not, but I'm about to. So the property that you did most of your thermal drone research on is a property that you've hunted for a long time, correct? Like
Correct.
yes. So I'm just curious, and maybe you've gone over this in other ones. I've not quite heard it, but based off of what you presumed as a hunter beforehand on how the deer were using terrain, and then studying these deer for thousands of hours with your thermal drone, what was true about your, like our assumptions as hunters? Because I'm assuming whatever you assumed was probably what all of us would assume about the terrain. What did you find to be like, yeah, I was pretty accurate on how the deer would use this? What did you see as like consistencies? And what did you see that kind of like threw you off based off of how you've hunted it in the past that you were like, I didn't see that. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah, so most of the property, I feel like I was 85 to 90% correct on in terms of how I thought they were going to be utilizing it. But where things got really, really steep on the south side of the property, that's where I kind of got humbled pretty hard in terms of what I thought I knew. And me and a couple other people, we kind of had debates, and we were always wondering. One of the more fascinating things to us about this property was sometimes we would get a picture in the morning of a deer on the very south side of the property, and then he would be a mile to a mile and a half on the north side of the property, by the middle of the day or by the evening. And you always kind of play the game like, well, how did you go from point A to point B, and what's the exact route that you could have taken? So I started trying to make all those, trails out, and then vice versa. Whenever I would go shed hunting and whatnot, then I would try to go out and find all of these trails and walk them and try to hammer them down. And I started kind of making estimations as to what the most likely connection point between the south side and the north side of the property would be, because there's just so much steep terrain in there in this kind of creek bottom with little cliffs and all sorts of things that people have seen on the YouTube videos. And there was one ridge that they use. Period. I haven't seen them use any other ones in this conglomerate of ridges where they could technically use this one, or this one. They only use this one really right down in the center, and I haven't 100% pieced together why. Because if the deer wanted to get to the north side of the property, excluding that one individual ridge, which I'll never show as to which one it is, because that would kind of burn it for everybody. But they have to go all the way around onto other properties, which they don't care about going onto other properties. But they would have to go way out of their way to get back to the north, which I'm sure they do every once in a while, just because they have things to do off to the east and the west, and then they kind of wrap back into the north. But for a direct connection from the south side of the property, which is still on the property, to the north side of the property, there was one ridge system that went down and back up, and they utilized it every single time. And the only thing that I can piece together is that there technically were two habitat edges on either side of it, so it was kind of like connection points. And then also, I think that location, I didn't realize it topography, on a topography standpoint, that it was the least amount of elevation change. But after going back in person and walking that exact trail that I've watched them walk so many times, it definitely has the least elevation change. So that was one thing that I noticed that I'd never guessed prior.
It's cool. Are you just having so much fun doing this, dude? Like, is there any point where you're like, I just feel like it would be your obsession with like watching nature and videoing nature and photographing nature. I just don't see you getting bored of it or sick of it, or like it's being a grind. You're flying this really, really amazing piece of equipment. You got this really cool thermal technology. Like, you got to be zooming in on all sorts of stuff, like raccoons. You seen any? Like,
Yeah.
I think one of the coolest things that my buddy, I have not seen this in the deer woods ever, but he sent me a picture of gun hunting last year, and he's like, "Dude, I heard this noise and I thought, oh yeah, there's a deer coming." And then he looks and he's like, no, it was a badger. And it was digging a hole, and it popped out of the hole and looked at me, and he's like, am I gonna have a problem like with this badger, because he's on the ground? And like, I just wonder, there's got to be some really cool things you've seen in addition to deer, and I'm derailing us a little bit, but I just can't see the honeymoon phase ending with this for you anytime soon. It's got to be so fun.
And I will say, last season there were a couple times where I don't know that I was getting bored of it, but I started kind of like losing the realization as to like how cool what I was doing was. A couple months in, while I was flying, I became used to it. I was going out every single day, and I'm flying for 8 to 14 hours a day and nonstop. And yeah, there were some stops where I got sick, or my kids were sick, or my wife was sick, etc. Or on Sundays I'd go to church, but for the most part, I was treating it like a job, and I was out there on every work day, and then plus quite a few times in the weekend. And anyways, a couple months in though, I started like while I'm flying, I kind of started getting bored watching a deer bed or something, and just a little bit of like just settling into my routine, I guess. And I would constantly have to remind myself like how cool this is as to what I'm doing, and the fact that I'm like doing like actual like research, and I'm documenting over 150 different data variable points on every single deer of every single day that I'm doing it. And this has never been done before, ever in the history of man, to this scale as to what I'm doing. This has never been done. And I would constantly have to remind myself of that. And yeah, and in terms of the question is to just seeing randomness, coyotes absolutely hate the drone. They will not tolerate it. They're the fastest animal to pick it up, actually. Foxes are probably second. Bobcats are third. Bobcats are kind of curious of it though. They'll see it and they'll be interested in it, and they'll just kind of watch. But at some point they'll get annoyed by it and they'll run away. Raccoons don't give a rip about anything, I don't think. Armadillos are armadillos, etc. So, but no, I've seen some pretty fascinating things. I went out and recorded some shots with like raccoons living in the hole of a tree, and then the mom raccoon had like all of her babies crawling all over, etc. It's just random stuff like that you normally wouldn't see. I actually haven't found a black bear, which we have black bears in our area. I haven't seen a single one. Thankfully, I've never seen a mountain lion, and I don't plan to, because those things are terrifying. Then I've recorded a lot of turkeys and stuff as well. But yeah, no, I've seen some cool stuff. One of the probably the coolest nature story that I've recorded so far. There was a buck. He's a pretty big deer. He's actually the picture on my website. If you go to my website, whitetailresearch.net, a little plug for myself. There's a photo of a deer, and he's laying dead in the creek bottom. And that deer is part of a really cool story that I'm going to make a video on someday. And because he was shot, and he was a gut shot deer, and just a family member knew that I had the drone, etc. And I advertised a little bit on Facebook that I could do deer recovery, just so I could go out and make a little bit of extra money. I think I only did 8 or 9 jobs, but these people had contacted me, and they knew me through my dad. And so I went out and I flew for this deer. It had been gut shot, and it had ran 550 yards or so, and it bedded back down, and it was mortally wounded. I mean, it looked absolutely terrible where it was laying. But in Missouri right now, whenever you locate a deer that's wounded with a drone, which makes a lot of sense, you cannot go out and you can't finish it off. And the reasoning for that, I guess, to stop the story, is so that way somebody can't call a pilot to go out and locate a deer that they shot whenever they never actually shot the deer, and then be like, all right, drop me the pin, I'll go finish him off or whatever. So that's why it's in place. But anyways, this deer was mortally wounded, and we were sitting there watching him. And at some point, he had gotten up and he'd walked over and he walked into a creek bed. And whenever he was standing there, I'd noticed a couple hot spots to the north of him come moving in. And I flipped back onto my Zoom camera, and they were 2 coyotes. And one of the coyotes wrapped down below him in the creek bottom and started bluff charging him over and over and over. And every single time the buck would spin, and he'd drop his head, and he'd pin his ears back, etc. And kind of show that he was going to beat the crap out of them if they came after him. But it was really interesting to see these coyotes like kind of testing him to see how healthy he still was. And then they backed out and they left. 2 hours passed, and they came back, and there were 8 of them this time. And he had moved a little bit further down the creek, and 3 of them got on all sides of him, and they just started bluff charging him from every direction. And he was lowering his head, and he's spinning around in the water, and he's charging at him. And it was one of the craziest things I've ever seen. And on this track, I knew the people, so I'd taken my wife and my kids with me, and it was like, I don't know, 12 p.m. or almost 1 a.m. And it was like, okay, we should probably go home. This deer is probably going to die, and I have so many regrets of not staying and finishing. I should have told her and my kid, like, go inside. We're going to sleep on these people's couch. I'm staying to record this deer. But I came back the next morning at 6 a.m. and he was dead in the creek bottom, and there were no coyotes on him. His back end was torn up just a little bit, but he hadn't been eaten into, which I found really fascinating. And the other part that's fascinating about that is within like a 100-yard circle of where he was dead in the creek bottom, there were around 15 deer, all within that range. And one side of me thinks maybe they're just curious animals, and they came in to see, like, okay, like the most dominant buck in the area has died because he was the most dominant buck, and they're all just curious about it. But the other part of me wonders, because he wasn't torn into that much, wonders
They
if
fended him
they
off.
were actually, they were trying to defend him off and trying to protect him. And that thought number two makes it even worse for me, that the fact that I didn't stay and record it, because it's like, oh my goodness, if that took place in nature, like that would have been one of the coolest things ever to record. I mean, what I had captured was still really cool, but the chance of seeing that potentially, I mean, I hope somebody records that someday, if that is a thing, because I think that would be one of the coolest things
They're
to
very
watch.
communal animals too. Like we talk about the fact that not we, but just hunters and all that researchers, like they smell on the molecular level. Like they probably knew that was Steve that was in trouble. Like I'm willing to bet that the latter could have been certainly true. If the coyotes weren't still there and he wasn't eaten into, I don't know what the point of them recruiting more coyotes to come and finish that deer off. They're hungry animals. Like they want their protein, their survival.
There's something to that communal aspect, and whether they were in that situation, very well could have been they came, they heard the coyotes, and they came and did something. But I tell you what, like in the early spring, late winter, when a lot of deer die up north, like I found a lot of shed antlers close to dead deer, which leads me to believe to that curiosity thing too. Where like they're checking out, they're smelling. I found a lot of antlers close to dead carcasses where deer die late winter, early spring, lack of food.
It's got to give off quite the smell.
Like deer,
Yeah.
like they're not just wanting to be around it. They're interested in for some reason. And that's really interesting what he just mentioned there.
Yeah, that's a very fascinating story. If that is something that, if you could have caught on, you may have potentially recorded a wildlife phenomenon that had yet to have been observed. So I hear you on I should have stayed kind of thing. But
do you think at this point, that you have observed mature deer during daylight more than any other person?
I've been asked that. Well, someone left a comment in my comment section. They said that I probably had. And in total, for reference, I've observed visually and spent time researching, I guess. I would say more so actual true research spent on mature bucks, because it's the amount of time that I have logged of data entry events that had taken place on mature bucks. It was 20 or 2,150 hours around, just about, spent watching mature bucks just live.
Dude, 8,000 more hours, and you get to the 10,000 hour rule.
Yeah, and then I'll be a master for the. I mean, the thing is I think I'll only be a master for this area, because things change per state, per types of terrain features.
Maybe we'll get some swamp buck data. We'll get some hill all the. I don't know.
I've got ideas for that. So
I'm sure you do, and I'd be surprised if you didn't. I wouldn't be. Yeah. I'd be shocked if you didn't. There's something that I've learned from Derrick here that has really cued me into, man, my words are hard to make sense of this evening. I'm tired. Every Tuesday I'm tired. About bucks killing daylight in and around their bedding area. And Derrick has talked about, don't think this is a term he has made up, and you could tell me if you have, but rub clusters, which are different than a signpost rub or a rub line, where a cluster of rubs in a concentrated area aren't made to show other deer. They're not walking this path. It's not like a flex. It's more of like almost a boredom thing, where these deer are killing time before they go on their journey to food for the evening or whatever it is. And I think when I watched your initial video, there was some affirmation of these deer just spending a gratuitous amount of time in their core bedding area. And I'm curious about the daylight hours of that, if this is something you've picked up to be true for our listeners to talk about, and something to cue into as a deer hunter.
I'm so glad you asked that, because I was curious also.
Yeah, no, 100% in the evening time frame more than anything. I've seen that take place, and what I've seen, the other interesting thing about the evening that I've seen, which was talked about on that first video, and I will probably end up making an entire video on that subject, anyways, is deer standing up, not deer, mature bucks standing up in relation to the thermals switching, and what I was noticing was it wasn't. I think that in the first video and in a lot of podcasts also, I've talked about how it technically was, though, in relation to time with whenever the weather was switching. So if you just looked at the weather app on your phone and you saw the peak temperature for that day and you saw whenever it kind of like flipped down and it,
Yeah.
it dropped 2 degrees or whatever, then deer were standing within 5 to 15 minutes of that time frame. And I think what's actually taking place as I've deep dove into this area of thermals is their particular area just so happens to have the thermals getting switched based off of where the sun's located. As the sun's starting to go down, that's whenever that area that they're bedded in is coincidentally getting shaded at that moment. And whenever that happens, that's whenever thermals switch, but they don't actually just do like a hard switch where they're rising all the way throughout the day and then it's just like, all right, time to fall. And then everything starts going down. Whenever that switch is taking place and that area starts getting met with shade and the sunlight goes away, then they're actually swirling. There's a really, really long period of swirling effect that takes place. It can be 30 minutes, 45 minutes, sometimes more. And whenever the thermals switch and they begin swirling, I think that puts a mature buck at a extreme advantage in the location that he's in. And in that scenario, I think they're standing based off of that. Whenever thermals start to kind of linger in that area and start to swirl in the location that they're bedded in, I think they stand up based off of that more so than
they probably feel how we feel when it's that last light and we're like, time to check in, MFer. You're telling yourself, you're like, this is the moment. Everything quiets down. You can feel it. You know what we're talking about when I say this as a hunter. I'm wondering if when that switch happens, they're like, time to stand up, motherfucker. Time to get real. And
no, I think that's definitely. And the interesting thing about it though, as to what Derrick number 2 or Derrick number 1, who's number 1 here? This
I'll
is your
be number
podcast.
2. I'm number 2.
Okay, yeah, I'm number 1. That's what I thought.
You are, my friend.
But whenever that takes place though, oftentimes I was seeing mature bucks stand in that one location, within a 30-yard circle, and just kind of browse around, ruminate, clean themselves, etc. For 15 minutes all the way up to 45 minutes in some cases, where they would just hang right in their bedding location that entire time. And then all of a sudden it was like, all right, they flick their tail and they decide they're going to head up the ridge and walk off towards the staging area all of a sudden for whatever reason. I haven't put a correlation to that yet as to why they decide to leave. All right, where in some cases they get out of their bed and they don't do that at all. They just bounce out immediately. But anyways, I've seen both. But more often than not, I see them kind of linger in their bedding area. And in that time frame, they will make kind of the cluster rubs, as to what you were mentioning. They'll just walk around and start making rubs all over the place. But I've also seen the cluster rubs take place in really heavily in like staging areas where it's not just him making rubs. There's like 8 to 15 bucks all in one really tight core location once he makes it to the staging area. That, in my opinion, what I've seen, especially whenever you have a dominant buck, it's almost as if those other deer, the younger bucks, they're moving in to see exactly what he's doing. Where's the dominant guy in the area, especially in the late season, over anything, but still moving in to see where he's at and then kind of reacting based off of him and kind of bouncing around him the entire time and observing him. But in that situation where they're in a staging area, then they all go in and they're making rubs all over the place. I mean, it's just
watching a
nonstop.
school kid in class, like, he's doing that. I'm going to do that too.
What he just illustrated is exactly what I was kind of thinking of when I scouted a spot this past spring. There's a bedding area. We're super flat here, so we don't have the same terrain as Derrick has in Missouri, but this really flat area that had really good cover, low cover, young cover. So not great for rubbing, but like really good for bedding, right? Like in dry years, really thick cover. And then as I came out of this, I found some beds in there. Okay, looks good. There's a couple little rubs. And as I came out toward this creek, it turned to alders, which trees that kind of grow horizontally, and the rubs started picking up. And like all of a sudden I started noticing other trails. And it was almost like exactly what he explained, where multiple deer were coming out to the edge of this creek where there was this thick underbrush, and then it opened up. But you could like see smaller rubs, but then like in the middle, I kind of found this like area where there was much taller, bigger thrashed rubs. And that's the area I followed back to like one of the main beds. But it was exactly what it seemed like multiple deer were like converging there, coming out of the bedding area. And then like the little ones were either watching for the big one or like making getting up earlier.
So if I'm an OKS hunter, all I got to do is figure out where the big buck is and then just kind of get a few rungs up there so I can shoot my spike.
And then shoot the smaller one when he comes in an hour before Sunday. There you go.
Like, if you think you know where a big one is, like he's gonna be really hard to kill. if you don't have that much time on your hand and you need to get some meat in the freezer, like your grandpa was talking about, like you could probably get it done on one of those smaller guys, 2-year-old buck or something.
It's really interesting what he just mentioned about the thermal switching and deer getting out of bed and like how that pertains to hill country versus like flat marsh.
Well, where I gun hunt, it's hill country. Actually, we call it bluff country. It's the western part of the state, and there's like sheer straight drop offs and things. Yeah, Mississippi and Wisconsin River, they kind of converge, and I don't know what to make of that yet. I'm excited to process this episode personally around the concept of like I think when last light is interesting because the sun is now like behind the horizon. It's set, and you get sunset and last light. There's this frame of time in between when the sun goes down and you still have light that you can see, and that's when I think then thermals are switching. And I have never had that thought or consideration enter my mind until this episode. And so then if you take it a step further, like you're talking about, and you take into account areas that might be shaded or not be shaded, your timing could be different. Now, what do you do with that as a deer hunter? Timing matters. And I think it was 3 or 4 episodes ago, we had someone from Midwest Whitetails on. They were talking about there's a rule of thumb about a deer traveling a certain duration of miles at a certain clip rate per hour or something. So if they could, I got this deer on trail cam at this time, they could theorize when or where that deer is bedding ish and where he's coming from. They would just keep moving the pin back or the stand back until they got close to that bedding and were able to intercept in like daylight. And I think that plus what you're talking about plus thermals, there's something here that feels actionable ish that you could kind of make some moves on to increase your odds as a weekend warrior, but you have to put in some effort. So I like the idea that you're just gold bricking at work, watching, like going through OnX or whatever and just plotting pins. And, hopefully you're doing some scouting off season to a degree. The more of that you're doing, the better you're going to be no matter what. You're going to have a plan A through Z if you do that like you do versus me. I have a plan A through maybe D or F. I don't really have a lot of additional plans. So like if plan A doesn't work, I'm kind of like, man, what do I do now? Just kind of making it up. But I like this talk track. This is pretty unique, I think, and interesting. And we asked you before we hit the record button, but I'll ask you in front of everybody here. Is there anything that you haven't been asked that you wish you would have been asked or that someone hasn't like addressed that you're like, man, I can't believe no one asked me this yet. What the hell? I'm like dying to tell people this.
Yeah, now I feel like I had an answer at that point, but now I've forgotten because while you were talking, you're mentioning how you were utilizing the evening and how the okayest hunters and the weekend warriors can apply this to their situation, but we've really only focused on the evening. And the bad part about that is there's this whole terminology that I started focusing on really heavily throughout the season, and it's not new, but it's net displacement. And I started measuring when deer would stand out of their bed. So in the morning, when deer would stand out of their bed, and then when they would bed back down in the middle of the day, and I would draw a straight line between those two. That's net displacement. And then vice versa for the evening, when they would stand out of their bed, and then all the way until last light. So they didn't have to be bedded back down. And in most cases, they weren't. They were still standing on their feet. But at the moment that legal shooting light ended, that's where I would drop that last pin. And then I would draw a straight line between the two. Morning net displacement was 4 times greater across the board on average than evening displacement.
So you're going to capitalize on increased
morning mature buck movement.
And there's a fine distinction to make here. There's a fine distinction to make here as well, because in total yards traveled, the difference isn't really that great. And in the evening, they're still walking around a lot. They're just staying in that kind of what we talked about. They're staying in that general core location. Whereas in the morning, they're walking a very missional, long, semi-straight, terrain-driven, in my case, travel route. And what it's going to do for you, if you're hunting in the morning versus the evening, is it's going to allow not only that mature buck to be alone more often, because he's on a mission, he's doing something on his own, but he's going to slip up a lot more often. He's going to position himself, especially if you have terrain features, he's going to position himself in locations where you're at the advantage in those areas, and he's not particularly. And there's no other noses, there's no other sets of eyes around to watch you or sniff you, and that's going to put him at a major disadvantage in that setting.
All right, I have a question for you, and I know you're probably getting close to bringing her down for a landing.
Mainly because my battery's down. I forgot my charger.
I'm sorry,
all right.
But I have to ask him, because this is a conversation I had with Tony Van Asten very good hunter
Mhm.
from Wisconsin, and he brought this up to me, and it's every time I think about it, it makes more and more sense. But Derrick, how many times? I don't know when exactly I'm assuming around daylight or around sunrise that you got your drone up into the air, but I'm just curious. Did you notice maybe that morning displacement? That number was 4 times larger. Did you notice that mature deer were sometimes bedded in the morning before daylight? Kind of like, so the theory that Tony had was a lot of times these mature deer are bedding down in those thermal hubs where they're getting all that thermal dump in the morning before even daylight or around daylight. They lay there for a little while, and then once the day winds kick in, they make a big move to go to a potential bedding area that's going to offer them the best advantage for that day wind, which means they're moving more in the morning daylight hours because they're seeking security before light in these thermal dumps where like everything's kind of coming down. He sees them bedding very low, and then they make a move during daylight to go to whatever bedding area is going to offer them the best for that day wind. Did you notice anything like that, or is that just something that you're hearing going, yeah, it's a cool idea, but no?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say for sure that I've seen something exactly like that, multiple times to where I can just document it, but I feel like I have, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've definitely seen mature bucks bedding in thermal hubs, like for reference in the morning, and then sometimes staying in those thermal hubs for a little bit longer past daylight, when thermals are still kind of falling down and draining towards the bottom, and then getting up a little bit later. But I've also seen where one thing I don't think a lot of people realize is how far into the morning a mature buck will move. Oftentimes, I'm not seeing them make their midday bed until 9 to 10:30 a.m. And for me, like as traditionally as a hunter, kind of how I was taught, once it hits like 8:15 to 8:45, it's like we're wrapping this crap up and I'm heading home type thing. Or yeah, we're gonna go take a nap or eat something, whatever. But like you're done in the morning. But from what I'm seeing, I'm seeing them still, and oftentimes, in that later period, they're in a pretty good location, but still, then they're still on their feet throughout that time frame. And I think that some guys that end up killing midday moving deer, where they're killing one at like 10:30 or 10:45, and maybe they're kind of near a community scrape or something in that situation. I think they're picking them up on the tail end of that morning travel route. Not so often making a midday shift in some of those situations. That's not 100%, but I think that that's happening more often than not. But yeah, no, I think what I'll have to do a little bit more thinking on his mentality, but it makes a lot of sense. I'll try to apply it maybe into the future though.
We're probably just gonna have to invite you back on because I'm gonna want to cover more about the drone side of things and the thermal side of things. But at one point you mentioned the amount of data points you're collecting. It was in the thousands or something, because you're getting thermal, wind, deer, time of day, time of year. And then you multiply that across the amount of time you put in the hours of 2,000 some odd hours. Maybe that's where the thousands came from. But are you using like an LLM to help like synthesize that data or like cleanse it and like analyze it? There's got to be another layer to this other than what your eyes are seeing.
Yeah. So I mean, pretty much
for you.
To explain like the basics of my process, I have like 30 to 45, I don't remember exactly, I'd have to look at the spreadsheet, but variables that are automated every single day. In fact, I have them automating per day right now, and they pretty much pull weather data and all sorts of different variables for my area and input them into the spreadsheet for me, and it I think it does it actually on every single deer that I have put into the map. So from deer number 1 all the way to 44 that I have already in the spreadsheet, from the moment that I log them in, it starts automating these variables in, and it'll do it wind direction. If there's going to be a midday wind shift, it'll input that. There's weather variables that get input into it, but in the end, it's just all the basics that most of us guys are looking for. There's also a lot of stuff related to moon phase that I have not seen a correlation with yet. For all you moon phase guys out there, I'm sorry, neither is GPS colors.
Front. I've been having that debate.
We're not moon phase guys.
No, we're not moon phase guys. It's just fine. Yeah. I mean, whatever. Yeah. But cold front is a topic, and I'm like, I mean, let's go around the room here and get opinions on this. I think it's just like, look, if it's chilly out and I have a fur coat on, I'm probably gonna move around more to get some like heat going. If it's a hot day, I don't have a fur coat on, I'm probably not trying to move to sweat my balls off. Like I would just distill it to that alone. But there's been deer studies that are like, nah, cold fronts ain't really doing it. I'm like, bullshit. But I don't know.
No, statistically, I've not seen a correlation as well with GPS colors in relation to cold fronts. Same thing.
There's a different thing for my wife. Okay, I need you to tell me that there's something statistically significant. So when I see a cold front, I gotta justify the hunt.
If we give you $20, Eric, you will kill a big deer.
So I think that it's also dependent upon your situation that you're in. So like right now we're in kind of a massive heat wave going on. It's freaking hot, 90 degrees outside. September season just started for us. And yesterday on the opening day, it was 90 degrees all day. And it sucked all day long. Trail cameras are dead, I'm assuming, pretty much everywhere. And there's just zero activity. And then all of a sudden this pop-up storm came in. It was like, and it moved in at like 5:30 p.m. and the temperature dropped by 12 degrees. I didn't go out and fly. I was in here editing a video, but I recommended to multiple people, get your butt out and go hunt at this very moment, because I haven't seen it with a drone, but in this particular situation where there's this evening cold front and there's just this stupid heat that's been going on, it's going to get deer up on their feet sooner. And I got a picture sent back to me from one of my friends of a pretty nice mature buck killed on opening morning from a little bit north of me. So no, I think there's definitely something to it. I just, from drone and the amount of data that I've input, I haven't seen it yet.
If you get a text from Derrick Dixon to go hunt,
you better go freaking hunt. Yeah.
The drone Whitetail Research guys sent you a text message to go hunt. You
Derrick,
might want to get up.
If you can send me a text about every 3 or 4 days that says, hey, you need to go hunt, I would greatly appreciate that, no matter the conditions.
Can we just can you set up like an auto responder? Like certain celebrities have I'll get a text from Gary Vaynerchuk. And it's not real, right? Like it's not.
It's real.
But it says it's from him.
That's not
if
real.
it was like Derrick Dixon says, go hunt right now, I'd be like, honey, this is it. We understand who this guy is, right? Like I gotta go.
I have to go.
If people would pay me for that and subscribe for a couple dollars per month.
That's your cameo. What's that cameo app?
I'm willing to
instead
pay
of wishing me happy birthday,
I'm
gonna just tell you I'm gonna pay you $50 to send me a text to go hunt at this time.
Dude, that's a pretty solid business plan. I think you get a lot of subscribers.
I'm gonna do it for weathermen too. I'm gonna get the local weather guy. Who are they around here? I don't know. There's one pretty famous one. I'm like, can you just text me it's time to go hunting? Or one from a trail cam company. We could really get a concerted effort around this thing. It's not just a cameo from Will Smith or Brad Pitt. It's all of them are telling me I need to go hunt right now. And I'll show my boss too. Hey boss, I gotta go. You understand?
It's not my choice.
Yeah. You understand what's happening here. Yeah. No, this is cool, man. So you have, I'm assuming, some pretty significant plans and a lot of work to do. You've hung your hat on this thing. You got a lot on the line, but it sounds like it's going well. What do you want to leave people with for today? What are the tidbits you want to kind of keep bringing people's ears as this episode comes in for a landing?
Yeah. For one, one thing I always mention on every podcast I go on is that I am working on a video in relation to thermals, and in my opinion, it's the pinnacle of all videos that I'll ever make, and I'm trying to make it as important as possible. It's probably going to be 45 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, but
longer. Make it longer.
Maybe longer. It's going to have 15 to 20 minutes explaining the science behind what the crap is actually happening. And from a scientific standpoint. So it's going to be just stupid nerdy, and we're all going to nerd out together. And then at that point, then it's going to break, and we're going to make it reapplicable for hunters. And but in the end, I like to kind of continue to pitch that video on every podcast. So that way it's something that I'm working on other videos as well. Of course, I have one that's going to come out soon, but that video in itself, I think, will be one of the most important ones that I make.
Do you have a working title for that one yet, or is that too soon?
No, it's too soon. I don't. I overthink and complicate every title that I make.
That's good. No, it matters because I think your thumbnail of your original launch that mattered a lot.
And I also want to just say I really, really love the humor that you drop into your videos.
It was good. It was subtle, but it was good.
Dude, you do a really good job with the videos.
I was he's one of us.
They're just freaking awesome. Yeah. They're so good. And I just want to say how jealous I am because Eric knows that the trail cams, I've always loved trail cams because getting a picture of mature deer in daylight is It's a glimpse into this world that not many people get to see. Like, and you talked about this on another podcast of like how like an encounter that you have with a mature deer for 1 or 2 minutes can like be a 1 hour story that you tell your buddies. Cause like no, people just don't see it that often, especially on public lands. So like the fact that you get to watch these deer do the things that deer do is so freaking cool. And thank you for sharing it with the rest of us who don't ever get to see mature deer do what mature deer do, because we appreciate it. And I just want to let you know that like videos of hunts where a mature deer comes out within like camera range and then someone films that deer stand there for 10 minutes or 15 minutes and not take a step. Those are my favorite videos to watch because I love just seeing them
how they behave.
They just break down that freaking environment.
Yeah.
And like, that's so cool. So thank you for sharing us and bringing us along with your journey.
Yeah. It validates. It's like the old M&M Christmas commercial. He does exist. They do exist. Like I need your videos to know that they do exist.
They're there. We just can't see them ever. It hurts.
No, your humor and your humanness that you've infused in the videos, like that's so good to see, because it is pretty scientific, and that science stuff can get dry. So like the humor and the humility of it all is like very welcomed, especially from folks like us who like really go out to self-deprecate. Like that's like a brand tenants, self-deprecating. So it's good. It's good to see, and we'd love to have you back in. And of course, like if you're ever able to come in studio, fantastic. I think that'd be a ton of fun. And as you kind of continue to put yourself out there this way, I'm sure there's gonna be lots of other fun opportunities with the MSU, Deer Labs of the world, the Onyx of the world, the other podcasters, content creators. So I'm sure you're just scratching the surface of all of what this is going to become.
Yeah, for sure. I see that every week. I feel like I've been contacted by everyone I was going to be contacted by, and then it's like, oh, that's a big name. You kind of have to like pinch yourself type moment, and then it's like, okay, just a human, not a big deal. So
yeah, we're all putting our pants on one leg at a time, and
correct.
If you're us, you're tripping and freaking smash your head on the headboard of the footboard, but stubbing your toe along the way. We'll get them on, but it's going to be awkward. There's like this awkward moment, like sometimes like I have to remember, like I can't just change on the side of the road and down to my boxers. Dude, and if I think I can, I'm like, this has got to be as quick as possible. And anytime you're trying to move quick, it's like when you totally fumble and mess it up, and like your wiener flops out on accident. And you're like, Jesus, man, get it together. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. That's never happened.
Sorry, this is not a wiener flopping out moment at all. But today I pulled into the Quick Trip right by my school.
Oh no, you didn't do it at Quick Trip, did you?
No, but I was putting on a new shirt. These are my work pants. There's no wiener flopping at Quick
work
Trip.
Pants,
you weirdo.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was changing into my shirt in the parking lot in my car, and the cross country team must have been running and going to Quick Trip. And one of the girls I've had in class comes around and waves, and I have no shirt on in my car. And I'm like, God, this is freaking the worst. I'm like, hi, Claire, with a shirt like hell.
Good thing you don't have like your nipples pierced or something weird.
I do.
Maybe you do. I guess I don't know you that well. I thought I knew you, man, but
Derrick #1 does, right? Dixon.
Oh yeah. I did that when I was about 14 years old.
Barbells. Yeah, they're cool. They're really. You sent a picture before podcast. They're pretty sweet.
If you like pain, that's how you
There's a
start.
dragon around.
If you get your nipples pierced, you're probably trekking into deeper into public land than the rest of us, because you got a higher tolerance for pain.
So last question: you did a full season of no hunting, pure deer observation. Do you have an itch to hunt, or are you just purely like in love with the observation fact? Like, how does that hunter part of you like play into like this season? You're like, damn, I wish I would like pick up a bow, or are you excited to film again?
Yeah. So, I mean, last year I did still get to go hunting. I went out and I managed does. I killed quite a few of them, which scratched the itch just like that much. Yeah. But this year, no, I'm definitely going to go and do more hunting. It's not going to be on the properties that I've researched. I'm going to look to do. Yeah, that's smart.
Like, he did up, down, left, right, and he totally got the deer he wanted.
Yeah. No, and I don't know when. It's actually kind of a depressing topic because that farm I've hunted it my whole life. And it's amazing. And I help do food plots and all the management and everything related to it. But now I'm not going to be able to go out and kill mature bucks because technically I feel like I've got 1 or 2 locations, maybe more, where it's like 100%er. If it's pre-rut or post-rut, like I could sit there and I'm gonna kill a mature buck within 5 days. Like there's no way that I wouldn't, in my opinion. And that makes it kind of hard. I think whenever maybe there's like some habitat change on the property, like maybe new clear cuts or something like that implemented, maybe that'll open it up. Or maybe I just take like a 5-year sabbatical from the property and then come back and then maybe I can start hunting it. But I think the biggest question more than anything is what am I going to do? Not so much for myself, because I really, in the end, I'm not crazy about getting antlers put up on my wall at the moment. I think it'd be cool, especially whenever I see like 130-inch, like gnarly mainframe 7. It's just a prick. I really like the idea of going out and shooting him. But in terms of just killing one to kill one, I'm not too crazy about it. But for me, it's whenever my son gets of age, because right now he's 3 years old. So whenever he becomes 6 and it's legal for him to go hunting, I'm kind of having to ask myself, like, what am I going to do about that? Like, am I going to give the key? I can't give the keys to the kingdom for the kid. So I'm going to have to like try to train him in the same way.
I put him in some good spots just because you're going to know some stuff. He's going to learn from a master. Like some of us have had the benefit of that. Dad, I'm sorry. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. My dad's a fine hunter, but I call him a master? Probably not. Unfortunately, but he's telling me the right things about how we do this stuff, and I think that's very valuable. But there's certain guys that grew up, where their dads are killing just world-class deer every year. Like you're starting a few mile markers down the freaking highway when you got that in your sleeves. Your son's probably going to have a great time.
Yeah, no, I'm sure he will. I think I'll probably start him out hunting fields in a tower or something, and he can sit there and be be miserable for a couple of years.
He'll be so mad at you when he realizes who you are one day.
Like, Dad, you knew those deer don't come out to the fields? You put me in a goddamn field? What the hell's wrong with you,
I had
Dad?
to send you through what everyone else goes
What do you
through.
think my youth was about, son?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it.
Well, how did everyone in the comments? I didn't see any like major questions come through that we didn't already address, and no callers this evening, which is fine. I'm surprised. Usually we get like a prankster every now and again. So it seemed like people were pretty tentative on just listening, and sometimes we don't get calls for that very reason, because they don't want to disrupt the flow of what we're talking about. So that tells me you did a good job. But I think just your YouTube channel is shared a QR code on the screen that if you scan it with your phone, you'll pop up on your YouTube, which is Whitetail Research. You have other social platforms you talk about. You converted the trail cam page to this. Anything else you should be pointing people to?
Yeah, no, it's just Whitetail Research across the board. I actually just updated my website, whitetailresearch.net. And if you if you Google Whitetail Research, I'm at the top now. So I am the first thing that pops up.
Good job on the name, man.
Yeah, that means I made it. Same. Yeah, in terms of domain rights and socials and everything. Yeah, I actually claimed it back in like 2020, so I've owned it for a while. But I was surprised whenever it was available everywhere. So
it's fantastic.
I'm a firm believer you can learn something from anyone, but I can tell you that as an avid whitetail enthusiast who listens to and reads everything, watching the videos that Derrick has put out, you will learn plenty. Yeah. You will. Like
it's a matter of what you do with it,
and you'll enjoy it.
Yeah,
it's really well done.
But for us whitetail obsessed folk, you can never learn enough about these creatures. Seeing them in their realm.
I wish I knew so much less, because it would make me so much happier.
It's just fun to observe them, and I think that in and of itself is a gift you've given our community, is the ability to observe these things that we love so deeply and dearly. So if nothing else, like that is it's a gift, man. Like you've given us a gift.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for your time tonight. Appreciate it a whole bunch. Hopefully everyone got something out of this. If you did, please comment. You can comment on YouTube. You can comment on our Spotify when this goes live to Spotify. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on what you learned, what you would like to have learned. If we didn't address something, that's just more reason to bring Derrick back on the show in the future, probably after hunting season, to see how it all panned out. And he's got more data to talk about. So, thanks again for being here tonight. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Anytime, guys.